start the recording here. Great. Well, welcome to another great edition of Account-Based Friday. And this Friday, we've got special guest Matt Heinz from Heinz Marketing joining us today. And as you know, every week we start off with a weekly poll. This week's poll, we talk about the challenges of account-based marketing and kind of what people are seeing or feeling. Not a ton of votes on this one. And I'm not sure why that is. I know LinkedIn has changed their algorithm recently, so that could be part of it. But I basically asked the question around what the challenges people were seeing in terms of initiating an account-based strategy. And the four buckets that I listed, alignment, sales execution, marketing, or other. And the reason I had selected sales execution, I kind of see this consistently right now across a lot of our clients and just across the industry as a whole. Marketing is spending a lot of time on automating their function and getting the technology up to speed. But the sales team that is changing from kind of the beat street cop to the private detective in terms of assimilating information, the sales focus and execution is really, really challenging to make that transition. But I was in the minority there. Marketing to sales handoff was the majority. I don't know, Megan, did you have a point of view on this week's poll?
What I've seen over the last few months is, I think, a direct response to what you were just talking about, John, where you've got companies investing a lot in technologies, acquiring a whole bunch of data, acquiring new contacts within target accounts. I mean, marketing really hitting the more button, to use that old phrase. But the problem is handing more over to sales isn't always super helpful. And I think they don't always know what to do with it. They don't know how to distill it. And because we haven't told them, we haven't given them proper help with that. So I think part of it is, the old, marketing sends over leads that aren't ready to sales. Well, I think many companies have moved past that tired argument. I think what we moved to is marketing sending us a bunch of information about our accounts, but we're not quite sure what that means we should do. And if you couple that with the increasingly digital nature of the buyer's journey, and not to mention an increasing focus on growth in post-sale, right? So saying expansion and retention are sort of the new net new. Then you have this changing role for sales and changing role for marketing. We're both figuring that out. So the handoff is harder and more complex. And there aren't really a whole lot of playbooks for how to do that effectively. So that would be my justification for this choice. I don't know if that's why others picked it, but that's why I did.
Absolutely. I don't know. Matt, first of all, thank you for investing the time today. Did you have a point of view on this week's poll by chance?
Yeah, I love this question. I think the marketing to sales handoff sounds like it is a transaction. And I think that there's a difference between, like, we talk a lot about lead management and sales enablement. If we flip that and instead said, like, what does the prospect experience look like? Like, if me as a prospect, like, your prospect doesn't care, well, this is email and this is social and this is BDR, so it's okay if they're disjointed. Like, I realize that's hard to do. It's not, no, they're seeing you as one brand and there's one experience they're having. So what is the continuity of the message and value from the marketing experience to the sales experience? It could be that fast follow-up actually doesn't help. If someone has asked for a demo, a quick follow-up is extremely important. If someone has downloaded a webinar, from their perspective, the transaction is over. They got their information, they got their white paper, they don't need to call right away. So it may not be the speed of the call, but the nature of the next step. What are you offering them that continues the value exchange there in the prospect's favor? So thinking about that and not just a transaction, I think, again, you can't just write a playbook and say you're done, right? You need to sort of do this in a more empathetic an authentic way.
Well, Matt, thank you, first of all, so much for joining us. I know your Fridays are very full with a couple of great and very well-regarded community calls with B2B leaders. So thank you for sneaking in another one with us.
Of course.
Thrilled to have you here. And actually, I think what you just said is a great lead-in to the topic that we wanted to talk about today, which is the rise of community-led growth, product-led growth, and the changing nature of trusted influencers in that process and how that's looking different. And it sounds like you had some interesting insights from your call this morning. So maybe you could share with us a couple of the takeaways and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many angles you could take on this. So, we, in our CMO group this morning, we covered, sort of how analysts think, and it got into, how are analysts compensated? What do they get credit for? What's on their KPI dashboard, as well as what is happening to the influence of the traditional analyst firms versus a boutique firm versus peer review sites. And you couple that with the research we're seeing from some companies in the space around the changing nature of buying committees. Lynn Capozzi at Acquia, they did a ton of internal research and found that the majority of buying decisions now have millennials and Gen Zers with direct authority. Right. And this is material, not just thinking about generationally who's involved, but also the nature of how younger generations are consuming information, seeking information, and prioritizing insights. They don't care as much about the Gartners and the Forresters of the world. The peer reviews are a bigger deal. Trust doesn't come from being around the longest. Trust comes from being the most authentic and credible to that younger audience. So I think this is not about TikTok versus whatever the new channel of the month is. This is about authenticity and prioritization of where you're getting information. So I think, and so because of that, you now see companies building their own analyst teams, like in some cases hiring former analysts, in other cases just hiring good researchers that can take your own data and other industry data and come up with insights that becomes highly attractive to prospects and customers and increases your credibility because it now becomes data-based.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, I used to tell my team at Sirius, our competition isn't the other analyst firms. Our competition is free. Mm-hmm. There is so much good information. And this was years ago, right? And now it's even accelerated, and companies are investing so much in creating high quality, meaningful data and insights, instruction about how to use their stuff. That if you're not doing that, it's almost like you're conspicuous, by your absence in terms of participating in the information sharing and quality information sharing. So yeah, there's a lot good happening in terms of companies being thoughtful about the experience they want to bring to their prospects, the experience and the impact they want their customers to get, and bringing in, whether it's incredibly knowledgeable people from the ecosystem around what it is they're selling to help their customers directly, or as you said, really great people to come in and help to create that content, great research to help support it in a credible, data-driven way. I mean, that whole community around a given tool can actually be, but in some ways, I think outweigh the tool itself. You might do a better job creating an environment for your customers that makes them stay versus, hey, your tool may be somewhat par for the course compared to others, but if you're creating that environment, you win.
Well, especially if you create a community that is not just about the product. If you create a community that really more centers around the role, and even more so around the people doing that role. Like the best communities are thrive because they focus on the communing, right? And the communing is not just Q&A about a product. It's really caring about each other and celebrating each other's success. One of the best examples I've ever seen of that in B2B was the Eloqua Topliners group, right? Where they had a community of people that were early stage marketing operations, marketing automation professionals that didn't just share best practices and advice, but just cheered each other on. And I think to your point, Megan, as well, I think, those companies that sort of create the best features, that's all fine and good. But, someone mentioned this morning in the analyst side, like the analysts are looking at features and they're not really looking at things like customer service. Right. And with many companies, like you think about, mature more as categories mature, you've got more parity across products. And so support becomes a critical differentiator in terms of being successful or not. And that's an insight you're going to get from a community, maybe not necessarily from a traditional analyst report.
Yeah. I think that's a great, sorry, go ahead, John.
No, go ahead. So I was just going to say, thinking about Gartner, for example, and, thinking about where the insights are coming from and something like the Magic Quadrant. I remember when I was a CMO, it was damned if you do, damned if you don't on the Magic Quadrant, because a lot of buyers back then were so tuned in to the Magic Quadrant. Now, that's more on the technology side of things. A B2B marketer can get a lot of that free information out there from the vendors because, as you said, a lot of people have now moved over into those vendors, into 6 Sense, On24, that analysts, have moved in that direction. But I guess I'm curious if it came up in the conversation today about the Magic Quadrant and its kind of focus. Are people as in tuned with having to focus on the Magic Quadrant, or are they saying, oh, you know what, I got to spread bets on community and Magic Quadrant, or does the Magic Quadrant hold a little less weight overall these days, or did that come up? It may not have come up.
Yeah, no, it definitely came up. I think, the consensus seems to be amongst both, the former analysts as well as the CMOs in the group that, like the wave reports from Forrester and the Magic Quadrants from Gartner are still extremely influential into enterprise. If you're selling those big deals, in a variety of industries, like, sales and marketing, technology, cybersecurity, the big companies use that as sort of a, cover your ass, so to speak, saying like, I've done my due diligence, but I'm validated by what I see here. Right. And the opposite is true. If you're like trying to make a bet on a niche player because you think they fit you better, like take account base, for example. Like I've seen many situations among our clients where a niche player actually is the best choice for them based on their go-to-market strategy, but someone in that decision-making process will say, but Gartner says we should go here, right? And you say, like, Gartner doesn't know our business. So you still have to have that discussion. So yeah, there's still an extreme amount of influence that those companies have. It'll be interesting to see where that goes, because the decision makers at those enterprise organizations tend to be a little older. But those millennials and Gen Zs are slowly going to get a little older, and their priorities and the way that they make decisions is going to seep in those larger organizations. So I think, for younger companies, for startups, influential, but, peer review sites, communities, at least equally as effective. It'll be interesting to see, how Gartner and Forrester respond to that over time.
Well, and I would argue the analyst firm that stays the most relevant is the one that maintains a healthy base of end user clients, so that the analysts are spending their time talking to people actually with challenges that they are helping to solve and giving them ideas and paths forward on how to use the technology, not so much spending our days, negotiating with vendors about where to put them on a quadrant, with due respect to that process. Yeah. It's extensive and credible, but to your point, may or may not be looking at the right things that really make or break whether or not you get value from that product in the end. And two, I want to talk to an analyst who's talked to 10 other people like me in the last 2 days and can help me with my problem. And that's, maintaining that really strong end user focus, I think, is the key if you're going to stay relevant as an analyst company.
I 100% agree with that. Like at one point we went down the rabbit hole today and we're talking about dot sizing, right? And like my Lord. Dot's not big enough. It needs to be not just position in the quadrant, but like, my dot's not big enough. And here's how you calculate it incorrectly. And look, I mean, once those things come out, like they're around forever. Like you got a 5-6-year-old report that people are still linking to on a landing page. Like, look, it's perception. It's important. But boy, I mean, you think about like what's really important, like getting, talking to an ombudsman somewhere about getting your dot bigger versus getting insights from 2 or 3 other CMOs that have a similar size and growth rate business as yours. Like I'd rather have that real-time feedback. I mean, I could argue, and this isn't a slight on analysts, is that, analysts in most cases, I'd be curious to get your opinion on this, Megan. Analysts are looking at the current and the past of what's going on. And it's very difficult to sort of evaluate the future that doesn't exist yet. And yet the CMOs, the people on the front lines and their teams are those that are experiencing that in real time and might have the earliest sense of what you should be investing for that future.
Yeah. Well, and think about where analysts came from historically, right? They were meant to be predicting the future. Mm-hmm. They were meant to be saying, here's where you should be going. And even if nobody's there yet, right? They were the ones out there, throwing the crazy ideas that 10 years later we might be catching up to, but you've got to at least have that vision that you're building towards. I think where you can get really stuck is if you're saying the highest part of the bar is the company that has the most features, and now I'm going to compare others to it. That's not super helpful to me. What's helpful is painting the picture of what's possible. Like, what are the best companies doing to achieve impact? What are new things that we could be trying or different ways we could be approaching solving this problem, or even saying, you know what, we're solving the wrong problem altogether. That's what I really want an analyst to be doing for me. I actually did a customer interview yesterday, and I passed along the compliment to one of the people on our team because it was a CMO I was speaking to, and she was saying, what I really like is that they're raising the bar for what all of us should aspire to, not just the best of what is. And that really got me thinking, and to your point, a great analyst is telling me things I don't know. And they're seeing things I don't see because they see across and wide. And that's hard work.
So could we define what analyst means? Because like if I'm at
I almost
if I'm
want to
at
get rid of
Gartner
that
or
term,
Forrester,
right?
if I'm at
Yeah.
Topo or Serious Decisions, I'm an analyst, right? Like if I'm a
Yeah.
Kerry Cunningham who got hired at 6 Cents, I'm still an analyst. If I'm Cherie Hulse, who was Serious and is now an On24, still an analyst. John, I can argue you're an analyst. I mean, seriously, like you guys do a lot of research. I recently got a request to do some research with that Eugen Bombora are doing, like you do your LinkedIn polls on a regular basis. If you are creating insights, if you are talking to CMOs on a regular basis and synthesizing that, or what Brent Adamson calls it, the sense making that he says good salespeople are doing today. Like if you are sense making based on hard actual evidence from a representative audience, you're an analyst. So I would imagine.
Matt, how about what you're doing every week, bringing a community together and your newsletter too?
Yeah, and it's not about me. It's about sort of what the audience is doing and saying, and sort of what are they bubbling up as saying they're important. And so, who can you listen to? I don't think you have to necessarily choose. But the criteria I would say is like if you're looking at big analyst firms, small analyst firms, individual influencers and thought leaders in your industry, like it's not about their noisiness or following. It's like, where are they getting their insights? Where are they? What information are they gathering that they're synthesizing? If they're making it up in a windowless room, interesting, maybe. But if they're getting it from actual people that are like you, now that synthesis feels more interesting.
Yeah, I would love to do away with the term analyst. I think it's really about influencers, right? And how, and to your point, that's the way that I think different generations look at it. Like if we grew up in sort of a more traditionally hierarchical view of you are labeled an analyst and an expert, therefore thou art. Okay. But I don't think anyone thinks that way anymore, right? We look for influence all over the place, and people who manage to stand out in a crowded market and environment become the influencers. Whether it's the coffee that my daughter wants me to buy or whatever else, right? Because it's somebody interesting, that becomes meaningful. So I think we have to broaden our mind in terms of who those people creating influence are. But to your point, Matt, I think also be a smart shopper. Does that person should we trust them? Should we believe them?
Yeah. Well, and also, it's not every point of influence it needs to be the same. I mean, you got to imagine.
Oh, you froze for a sec, Matt.
And then you've got
dramatic moment.
All right. I think I lost you for a second there. No, you've got the you've got the magic quadrants that take God knows how much time to create. And then you've got a quick LinkedIn poll that John puts up, right? And so those are both insights. Those are both sources of information. Is one that much better than the other? It depends on what you want to learn. It depends on what you're trying to get.
Yeah.
If you're a real-time sense for what the market is doing and thinking, I'm going with John's poll, right? Because I think, the Forrester wave, especially as markets accelerate, especially in a wartime, pre-post, during pandemic world, the adjustments that are becoming fixtures is happening so quickly that I think the more real-time collection of insights and analysis is that much more important right now.
Well, I think too, you bring up an interesting point about the real-time side. With COVID, we're all working from home. So gone are the days, well, they're maybe coming back, but gone are the days of we're all schlepping to an event like IT Symposium for Gartner, like their marquee event, and everybody shows up and that's your one meeting with the analyst. Now you're almost forced to get that information in other regards. So Slack and having that Slack community, like the community that you run for Coffee Talk, you're able to get those insights on almost a near real-time basis and for free, right? You can put it out to the community and boom, you get that instant answer, or the LinkedIn poll, or, you can, the speed of that information has accelerated much differently than kind of schlepping to the event.
Yep. Well, and I think about, the Serious Decision Summit was like a mandatory event in B2B for years. And I'm going to the Forrester B2B here in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to going down there. But even during the Serious Decisions event, I mean, I love the sessions, I love the insights, but like I could get that from home, right? Like I could read the press releases, I could get combinations. I used to go to that event, and I'm going in a couple of weeks primarily for the community. Right.
Yeah.
And it's going to a place, and it could be whatever, but if you're getting that many senior B2B executives in a room to learn and share with each other, like that's a place I want to go learn as well. And honestly, like sometimes I get more out of the hallway conversations about what's going on than in the presentations themselves, because that's something I can get elsewhere. Those individual conversations, very hard to do. Is it a one-to-one, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And you mentioned the Eloqua Topliners community. And I think that's something some of the other companies now are picking up the mantle of really developing communities around their brand, but around bringing people together and having great conversations. I think where analyst firms can lose their way is thinking that that event is really about their content. Kind of, but the content is really a conduit to bringing people who have like challenges and like roles, to your point about role-based, together. Yep. And I think if you overcorrect for making it all about the content and under support the opportunities for people to engage and talk and just have those hallway conversations, you're really missing the boat. I totally agree. It was always about the community, even if my 400 hours of review time would want me to think it was about the content.
Well, I mean, look, and ultimately it was about both, right? I mean, you created great content and insights, and that compelled people to want to be there, but you also created a community, right? And I think that a lot of those groups continue because of the community. And anytime, like, I mean, look, what you guys had at Sirius was so special. And anytime an acquisition happens, you're like, what is going to continue here? Like, I have full confidence that the content and the insights are going to continue. Like, I think there's a lot of
no doubt,
like, yourself and Carrie and a lot of people have moved on, but like the insights and content will live on. That community is special. Like Eloqua Topliners was amazing. And then their acquisition happened, and a couple key changes happened to the community, and it kind of faded away. And that was a huge competitive asset that you can build over time and lose very quickly. So, I look forward to seeing, like, as John said, like, we're working in our basements now. I'm going to go to Austin and wear actual work clothes and put on real shoes in a couple of weeks. Like, I hope we get some of those. Like, I don't need to be on the road nearly as much as I used to be. Pretty happy that I can do Friday morning from down here and still get to talk to CMOs, right? As if I was in a room. But like those opportunities to get together, I mean, look, all the technology in the world, all the G2 peer reviews in the world, we've spent tens of thousands of years talking to each other face to face. And so the human interactions and the relationships we have, like, that is always going to be the connective tissue until robots sell to robots, which may be in the future. We may get to see it. But until that completely happens, what we build virtually is accelerated and compounded when we can get together in person. And that becomes part of the community as well.
So Matt, when you think about what's made your community building so successful, and to your point, it's also super easy to lose really quickly. What are a couple of lessons you'd share with the audience about that community building?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one is, I mentioned sort of, good community is about the communing. So it's, and in other words, like people that really care about each other. Some of my CMO community is, people will share, things they did over the weekend. We've got an off hours channel where people share about their hobbies. We have a rants channel where people can come and complain about things that are going on in their work, in their lives, whatever. I think, we've also, you really do have to be a CMO or a head of marketing to be in the group. And that is initially was sort of by design, and sort of as we've grown has been by request of members to say, I need a safe place. I need a safe place where I can go and I can share and learn from my peers. There's a hard no pitch, no solicitation policy. There's also a hard, we don't record the Friday sessions policy, so that people have that safe place to share. But I think just making it about them, making it about the connections of the people to each other, making it not about just the job of the CMO, but the CMO themselves. Like when we did an in-person retreat in December and had about 125 of the members come, and we had 4 themes for the sessions. It was my impact, my career, my life, my legacy. And I could argue 3 of those 4 things wasn't about the job. It was about the person. Yeah. So by focusing on the person and the whole person, not just the CMO job, I think we create a community that shares more about each other and learns more from each other, and therefore cares more for each other. And I think that care and interest is what sort of binds a community together.
It's pretty amazing, the community that you pulled together over COVID too, where everybody's on Zoom. So, it's great that you're able to pull that face-to-face meeting, but it's taken a couple of years to get to that point. You've been able to maintain that momentum and bring it to that face-to-face environment, which is pretty incredible. Just keeping an eye on time here, and we could probably talk all day long with you, given the insights. But Just, I guess, one last closing question or thought. And we've got the CMO of G2 Crowd who's going to be joining us in 2 weeks. Actually, they just go by G2 now. Amanda Malko, she'll be joining us in 2 weeks. I would imagine between G2, Trust Radius, Capterra, even Gartner has their own peer insights, although I can't say that our clients use them as extensively as those other products and capabilities. Are you seeing anything trend-wise there as it relates to the Gartners and the Forresters, or like what did that topic come up at all in terms of kind of the peer review side of things?
Yeah, I think, it's a double-edged sword sometimes with the G2s and Trust Radiuses. Obviously, you've got sort of, it feels like a more authentic, user-driven audience, which is clearly true. I think some of the feedback is more about sort of using the product and the ease of using the products versus sort of what the problem solves. I think you run a challenge in any piece of feedback you go and look at, whether it's the Gartner Magic Quadrant or whether it's the, what you see on G2 is like, people like it, people don't like it. And you say, oh, it looks like more people don't like this than like it. Well, what were they trying to achieve? What are their criteria for evaluating this? And how is that similar? How is that different to what you're trying to achieve? Like for years, people would say like, hey, Matt, what's the best marketing automation tool on the market? And pound for pound, I could answer that question. And hell, pound for pound, that's exactly what the Gartner and Forrester reports were doing. But that answer was the wrong answer for the majority of the companies that were asking, right? You don't need the best product, you need the best solution for you. And that might be different than what is the industry leader for whatever reason, right? And so, back to sort of, my Sherpa along this is Brent Adamson just continues to do great research and great insights. And he created the problem. And I've bugged him about this. He created the problem with Challenger Sales say we all need to create commercial insights. And so now everyone's coming up with commercial insights to challenge the status quo. And now he comes back and says, okay, well, there's so much information out there. We need sense makers, right? How do you make sense of what's out there? And I think having a clear vision for what you are trying to achieve and what you need, weighting your priorities as you look at the waves and the quadrants and the peer reviews, to be able to weight what you see. And still, no one's going to tell you what the right decision is for you. You still have to make a good decision based on your objectives.
Sounds good. Megan, any other final thoughts here? I'm going to drop the Brent Adamson article in chat here for those that have joined us, but any other closing thoughts here as we wrap?
Just a big thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us. And what a fun conversation. I haven't thought about some of these topics in a little while, so it was fun to take a moment to think about how the market's changing. And yeah, I thank you very much for taking time with us on your busy Friday.
Well, of course, no problem. I very much appreciate being invited, have really appreciated watching and following the series that you guys are doing, and we'll continue to do so. So yeah, thanks for the invite, and I'll keep watching.
Yeah, grateful for making the time, Matt. So thank you for coming out. Next week, we have Aparo from ZoomInfo. He is the head of the ABM initiative at ZoomInfo. He'll be joining us. And in 2 weeks, we'll have Amanda, who's the CMO of G2, will also be joining us. And we got a special guest in the background, Star Wars.
West Coast spring break, still in his Vader jammas. They're literally waiting. So I told them at the bottom of the hour they can start playing Xbox. And so
there you go.
All right, right on. Well, we will let you